too hot, I might drop off, just to let you know that. Yeah.
Sure. So my intention today is to basically walk you through a CISCA report, so you get a sense of what is included in it. The sample report that I have is 48 pages long, so I will not be stopping on every page. I think I'll put you guys to sleep if I did that. What my focus will be on is what's different compared to the original CISCA that we created. And the difference has been, I guess, initiated from our research around team dynamics, as well as around our safety assessments into, what leaders and teams are looking for. So what capabilities do we need of leaders, and what impact does that have on our people? And so that research was primarily around culture typologies. So we are using the Ron Westrom culture typologies now across all of our assessments, team-based assessments. So we'll touch on that and understand that a little bit more. And following today, I will send you the paper that he wrote, which is about those typologies as sort of background information. It's a really good read. It's not too long, thankfully. And each time I read it, I find a little piece of nuance in there that adds more layers to it. So I encourage you to continue to play with it. And I'll also send out the sample report as well, so you get a chance to actually have a look through it at your own pace. So culture is the biggest change, probably. In addition, before we measured as an outcome or impacts, we measured engagement. So the engagement questions have tightened up a little bit, and we label those impact. And in addition, we've added psychological safety as an outcome of capability and culture. Of course, psychological safety is very topical at the moment. It felt like all the stars aligned when we were doing our research, bringing out Amy Edmondson's work, having a look at that and understanding that and what that might look like in our assessments. And the world was already starting to talk about it as well. So I think her work is a few years old now, but it's like the world started talking about it since COVID. So that they're probably the two biggest influences and changes on the new report. The other one is a slight difference, which is in the capability section. We used to have around the spider gap the 5 domains and the care standards. What we've done is we've taken the standards out of the spider gap and represented them separately. So now that the spider graph is purely the leadership framework domains, and then the standards are represented differently. So we'll pause there and just understand what those standards look like a little bit. Any questions so far before I start screen sharing this report?
I think that's really wise to do that way. Then for transitioning in with other.
Sorry, Arlene, I didn't quite get the full comment there. It doesn't matter. Sorry, mate. So what the nice interaction with between our CISCA team-based assessment and the CILCA is that with the CILCA, the leadership assessment, it is obviously the spider gap image with the capability around the spider gap, and then we also represent impact and psych safety. So a leader gets an indication of, as a result of their current capability, what's the current impact they're having on their team and the current level of psychological safety the team or the people who provided feedback have. So that if you did both the leadership assessment and the CISCA, there should be a nice story between the two. Okay. Good. With the CISCA, what we do is we ask the leaders to provide feedback on the team, and we ask team members to provide feedback on themselves. We ask customers to provide feedback on the team, primarily around customer satisfaction and Net Promoter Score. There is an alternative to the customer feedback for those who are internally focused. So if the finance team, for example, in a provider wanted to do a CISCA, but instead of asking external customers, they could ask internal customers to be a feedback provider group. So you can either ask external customers if you're primarily externally facing, engaging with clients, residents, family, or if you're more internally focused, you can ask what we call an interfacing team. Okay, so there's the options depending on which team is doing it and what their focus is. All right, I'm going to start screen sharing as soon as I can. That's it. There's the button. The button's always in a different place between Zoom and Teams. Okay. So now that I'm screen sharing, I can't see any of you. So feel free to speak up if you have a question along the way.
Sure.
Okay, so front page, always attractive, but not the main game. So let me scroll through. So just to sort of reiterate what is in the report or what we actually measure. So it's the three main areas: capability using the leadership framework and the standards, culture. In the past, with culture, we asked one quantitative question and 3 qualitative questions. We now have more. So we have both an overall culture score and feedback against quantitative questions that talk about the new typologies, the Ron Westrum typologies. So there's quite an extensive culture section. And then lastly, impact. And that's where we talk about engagement, psychological safety, and customer satisfaction. So we'll probably find in the capability section, we'll focus around the standards and how they are now presented. In culture, we'll talk mostly about the Ron Westrum typologies. And in impact, probably focusing on what the engagement and psych safety stuff now looks like, because the customer satisfaction things haven't changed at all. Okay, so there is an explanation for all of those different elements out the front, but just zooming through. So this is what the spider graph now looks like. So we find it looks a lot more sort of nice and compact and clean and fresh, I guess. So we've taken the standards from this view and put them in a different view, and we've tightened up the nicknames around the edge. So now when you see the nickname, the whole question should be pretty obvious, and the whole question is still obviously in the detailed section. With the team assessment, the domains are caring with integrity, care, which is about self and how your self is presented, caring for team, so how do I look out for my teammates, caring with purpose, how do I stay connected to our goals and our purpose as a team and organisation, caring safely, how do we look out for each other, how do we keep improving our processes and systems, and caring differently, which is how do we keep improving, seeking better ways, making changes. Sorry, was there a question?
Somebody has their hands up.
I think Carlene's got a question. It's just not coming through.
Let me see if I can. I might need to stop sharing and look at the comments, the chat. I think, sorry, Arlene, I can't see a question in there. And you're on mute if you're trying to say something. All right, I'm going to go back to screen sharing. Okay, so hopefully the spider graph is pretty familiar to you guys now, and you're able to sort of feel like comfortable having a look at that. Once you get the sample report that I send out, when you look at that deeper, you've got any further questions, feel free to reach out. But because that is pretty standard, I'm going to flick through now. It has all of the usual tables around top 5 strengths, top 5 gaps, the different views. So because it's about the team, it shows the leader's view of the team and then the staff members' view of the team, and the gap sizes. So they're the different perspectives that it will show. And then I'm just going to flick through these, all these detailed sections, because you guys can have a look at that's the same. So here is the standards now. So what we've done is the feedback that we've got from the industry was they were always intrigued if someone answered the standards question and put less than 5 as the desired state. So the questions were always, where are we now? Where do we want to be? And the care organisation would say, why would anyone put less than 5? And so what we've done is we don't ask what the desired state anymore is. We just assume it's 5. So we only ask current state, where are you currently? And we ask the leader's views, the team's views or the staff, and we ask the consumer. So that's the 3 different colours you see here, the blue, the orange and the grey. And what the graph is showing is where do we believe we are currently across all of the standards. So I'm just going to try and make that a bit bigger. And so you can see with the first standard, treat consumers with dignity and respect. The leaders feel like that's all of the time. Staff feel like it's just over most of the time, and so do consumers. And yet there's a slight difference. If we go down to effectively respond to changing consumer needs, we can see there's very different views between the leader, the staff, and the consumer. And that's often an interesting place to spend time talking about with the different perspectives, saying, well, you know, what's behind that? Why did you answer that way? What are some of the differences that you see? So it's just the current state response that it's showing. So it's the average score for those different perspectives. We then provide a table which is about gap size. So because 5 is always assumed to be the desired state, we take the actual result and calculate, actual result for current state, and we calculate the difference between the two and apply the colour coding system, and that's represented at the top there. So a score more than 0.9, lower than 5 is a red or large gap. Between 0.4 and 0.8 is an orange or medium gap, and then between 0 and 0.3 is a small gap. So where there is the gap between current and 5 is either small, medium and large. And we also show where people have said NA. Sometimes when staff or leaders or consumers say that a standard is not applicable, that's always an interesting conversation as well, or potentially an interesting conversation. You know, why isn't this one applicable? Why do you feel that? That kind of thing. So it just lists each of the questions, and then from the leader's perspective, the staff perspective and the consumer perspective, it gives you the number, which is the current rating of the average of those groups, and the colour coding is related to the gap between that number and 5.
And then the percentages, Donna, can you just talk to the percentages just so I confirm my understanding?
Yeah, so they're the percentage of that group who said that question was not applicable. So on the first line, it was 25% of leaders said not applicable.
Right. Sorry, yeah, get the labels now.
Something I've just picked up is we don't have an N equals on that table, so that we're not sure about.
Yeah, that's what I was actually, I was missing that NA label for a second, and I was wondering whether that was percentage of respondents across the board. So yeah, that would be helpful too.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so just in the explanation above, it just says questions that were deemed by raters as irrelevant have been indicated as NA or not applicable.
Good. So
hopefully relatively self-explanatory. Lots of numbers there, lots of colours. So then the next section is all about culture. So the usual thing, the thing that hasn't changed, trying to find my words, is this question that we ask. So we basically say, how would you rate the culture on a scale of 1 to 10? And they provide a score. Then we would ask the qualitative questions around how do you feel, what do you have to do to fit in around here? What does the team do well? And what could the team improve? And these are qualitative questions that give sort of comments and responses that we then theme into different areas. So, for example, what does the team do well? Supportive, customer-focused, collaboration were the 3 top themes that came out of all of the comments. So that's a regular part of the team-based assessment. Any questions about that part of it from just, I guess, reconnecting with it? Okay. So then we start asking some questions that are about these typologies. So sort of a first touch on the typologies. Ron Westrom did this work back in the 80s, I think, so it's not new, but it's actually having quite a big resurgence in usage, particularly in the DevOps space. And he's done a lot of case studies with, space, NASA, with hospitals, with aviation, with lots of different industries. So it's been kind of shown to be a really solid method for looking at and understanding culture. In his paper, he actually has 3 typologies: generative, bureaucratic, and what we call detrimental. He calls it toxic. We've chosen to call it detrimental because we feel that's a much more acceptable word here in Australia than toxic. I think toxic culture has been thrown about in the West Australian too many times, and it's probably oversensitized us to the word. So the idea is that we ask questions that help give us feedback that understand what types of culture are currently present in the organisation. And mostly all 3 are present. It's not one or the other. So detrimental culture is about a power orientation. So it's about how do I stay safe as an individual? So how do I avoid blame? How do I not stand out to be made fun of? How do I not upset people? And that kind of feeling is across a large number of people. So it's characterized by low cooperation, hiding of information, or holding on to information, not speaking up if there is something that they're not happy with or not safe, or it might embarrass them. If people do speak up, they're usually messengers are shot, so to speak. So people might not listen to their ideas. They might shoot down their ideas. They might, not act on anything that's raised. So you can really hear how that's a detrimental, toxic type culture. The next typology is bureaucratic. And this is about having a rule focus. So the rules matter more than the people. So it's about focusing on, well, what's the hierarchy of control? Whose job is it to approve that? Or who's responsible for that? Where we compartmentalize responsibilities. We make sure information flows through the approved channels. Messengers with information that's a little bit uncomfortable, they might be kind of ignored or neglected. And when things go wrong, we tend to start creating more policy and process as a way to make things better. So the difference between detrimental and bureaucratic, there's typically some positive intention around the bureaucratic. It's about getting organised, having role clarity. Policy and process is valuable in staying safe and having an effective organisation. So there are some positive intentions with the bureaucratic elements. What we find is when it becomes all about following the rules and we lose focus on why we're here, so our purpose, it becomes overly bureaucratic and therefore it's less successful culture. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. So then the third typology, and as you probably guessed, the one we all want, is the generative culture. And this is where we're all purpose driven. So my own personal needs, the needs of the rules or the needs of the team are less important than the needs of our purpose of our organisation and why we're here. As a result, we share information easily, we cooperate, we work across teams. We're very curious about how we can continue to deliver on our purpose, our why. We focus on making sure the right people have the right information at the right time. It's not about putting it through the approved channels, it's just who needs to have this information, when they need to have it. When things go wrong, we look at the system as well as understand at the system and what's causing things to understand how we can improve it and how we can make sure the interconnected parts are working really well in our business. And messengers are, I guess, supported and trained to bring out the uncomfortable information or the things that might, you know, potentially upset. We actually encourage that sort of stuff to come out rather than kind of hide away from them. Does that guys give you a feel for the 3 different typologies?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, great. So of course, Ron's paper does a much better job of explaining all of that, and this table is in that paper, but he's got some really good examples about the difference between the 3. Our intention in the team-based report is to understand, well, how much of each is present for this team and what are the elements that make it that present. So we've taken some questions that have been used in the DevOps community to measure typology as well. So these are 8 questions that we ask that are quantitative. So in my team, information is actively sought. In my team, I feel genuinely cared for. New ideas are welcomed. Messengers are not punished when they deliver news. Failure leads to inquiry or enquiry, so curiosity, rather than official inquiries. Responsibilities are shared. Collaboration is encouraged and rewarded, and I'm motivated to work safe because I genuinely care. So you might notice in all of those questions, there are some that are positively framed and some that are negatively framed. That's deliberate, partly because we don't want people to get too complacent when they're filling out surveys and just keep hitting one number. So it's about making sure they're really thinking about the question, particularly as it relates to their team. And the scale is agreement, so strongly disagree through to strongly agree. Any questions about those or comments?
That looks great.
Yeah, I know this is a bit of a fly through, so when you get a chance to actually sit down and flick through the report, it'll start to come together. The intention is across the report, pieces of information come together to build a fuller picture. So what's showing up around our capability and our strengths and our gaps that might be contributing to the things in our culture that are showing up that then have an impact on our engagement and psychological safety and our customer satisfaction. So as you're reading through the report, in sort of preparing to debrief it almost, or even preparing to provide recommendations, it's noticing what's the building story in all the different pieces. So then the team here do an analysis of the typology. So taking into consideration the answers to those 8 questions and the qualitative responses in the earlier culture questions, we kind of look at, well, what is present? What are people talking about? And where would they fit within the different typologies? And then we basically show it in this frame. So essentially the black line represents a neutral position. Anything above the line is positively contributing to culture and performance. Anything below the line is limiting culture and performance. For example, we've assessed that there's about 11% of the culture is detrimental. So there's something that's holding it back, something that is about that team's way of doing things that is detrimental. About 35% of it is positively bureaucratic and 19% is negatively bureaucratic. The difference between the two is what I was sort of talking about before, where the positive elements of bureaucracy is around being organised, having role clarity, clear policy and process that enables us to get our work done, to have information flowing really well, to support performance. The bureaucratic is when we start to say, well, because the rules say so, and so we stop thinking, we stop getting curious, we forget about purpose. And then the generative is where we see a really strong sense of team care within the team, strong sense of purpose, indications that information is flowing freely across and through people. And so it makes for a really generative type of team. So that's an initial look at the typologies as we assess it. And then what we do is in this table, give examples of the things that were mentioned that are our indicator of where they sit on those typologies. And so these are using that, like I mentioned, those qualitative responses and the questions, the quantitative questions.
Excellent.
So an example of the bureaucratic negative, because I think this positive negative thing is something I often get questions about, people trying to understand what's the difference between. So a negative one, for example, is in this case, information flow is limited, possibly due to time constraints and the perception that workload is too high. So I'm focused on my task because task is what I'm assessed against, rather than taking time to share information or report a concern, raise an issue, that sort of thing. Okay, so hopefully when you receive a report and you see these sorts of comments, it's easy to connect with the different typologies. Okay, I'm just going to pause sharing for a moment because I can see Fiona, I can see lots of nodding, which is really reassuring for me as an extrovert. I'm getting some feedback, but I haven't been able to see your lovely face, Stacey. So I wanted to just check in with you both. Any questions, comments so far in any of that?
Oh. I think your mic's off, Stacey.
That's that delay between when you hit the button and it actually works.
Oh, got it.
We can't hear you, Stacey.
Oh my Lord. Or going on.
Okay, I can hear you now.
Okay. Oh my God, I don't know what was happening there. Press off. So I was just saying, it's really, I'm loving the changes. Both as a leader and as somebody who supports leadership, just to be able to see that you can support them to see particularly what the people themselves that are being led are thinking, and to see the differences. I think for me it's landing really well, and I love it. I love to see that. Yeah.
Okay, great. So, yeah, so what I heard in there is the fact that we're gathering information from the staff about what they're experiencing and what it's like for them within the team, that is both helping them perform really well, as well as maybe holding them back or hindering them a little bit. And so for the team to, I think when I've done team reports like this before, one of the great things that I've had back is staff go, our voice has been heard. The things that we want to say are being represented in this report. It hasn't the message hasn't been lost in the way the information they've shared with us has been given to us. So it's been almost like a really boost to engagement in that moment, because staff are feeling very heard as a result of seeing this information.
Yeah, and culture is so important because we can talk about psychological safety all day, every day, and sometimes it's really hard to measure that. And when you ask people, sometimes they'll say, "Oh yeah, I can talk," but deep down they don't. But when they sit it on a survey and they answer some questions, then you can see where they're sitting at. So I like that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that presentation format is really visually, it's very appealing to me anyway. Fresh eyes looking at it. Yeah, it's landing really well, as you said, Stacey.
Okay, great. Well, we'll push on and have a look at the next part, which is around the engagement and psychological safety elements. So I'll just go back to screen sharing. Okay. So rolling right through, we're at about a page 35 of 48 so far. So we're doing okay. With engagement, it has the same elements as it had before. So questions that relate to how do I feel about my career development, my intentions to stay, commitment to the organisation's goals, as well as the organisation itself. Psychological contract, which is, do I feel what I'm putting in is equal to what I get out of my relationship with my employer? Satisfaction and mission and vision, connection to mission and vision. And so they're the sort of things that we ask. We ask it at an organisational level and a team level. So quite often there is a stronger connection within the team, the local team, than there is to the higher sort of organisation. So you probably hear that sort of commentary around, you know, oh, we're great here as a team, but the organisation needs work. And so there's often a disconnect between us and them kind of language. So it's always sort of interesting to see the difference between how they answer when they're talking about the organisation to when they're talking about their own team. So here is the organisational results. So questions down the left-hand side with people rating from strongly agree to strongly disagree. The overall score is down the right-hand side. And then the overall engagement score is down the bottom in bold, which I think is 70%. So, you know, generally blue is best. The more blue, the better. And it's interesting to notice the nuance between people saying a neutral, sort of almost the disagrees are interesting, but sometimes the neutral is often where there is great opportunity. So, for example, on this on the question, my ideas on how to improve the organisation are listened to. We see 34% going, don't know. And so that's a huge opportunity to improve engagement within the team if we can shift that 34 up into the agreement area. And that might not take much either. And based on the results in the culture section, it could be things like simple things where they were talking about, you know, it's all about getting the job done rather, and so no time to talk about stuff. So allowing staff to talk about stuff could be as simple as you need to do in this example. So yeah, all these questions haven't changed, I don't think, from the original CISCA. It's just presented a little bit differently. So that's at the organisational level, and then we show the same questions at the team level. And I think you'll notice the overall engagement score on this one is 76. So engagement at a team level is higher than at an organisational level. So the team's engagement with the organisation is slightly less than its engagement with itself. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so same question, same scale. We're asking them to reflect on what it's like within your team. So the first question around I am supported to progress my career. At an organisational level, I might feel like there's not many opportunities, but my direct line manager is always encouraging me and giving me lots of opportunities. Or it could be the opposite, depending on you know, their experience. The organisation has lots of opportunities available, but my line manager stops me from taking advantage of them. Okay.
Love it.
So we feel like this is a nice, clean way of representing them. And again, you get a sense of the colours, give you a sense of there's a lot of strength happening here. There's a lot of good stuff happening, particularly around team, lots of strong blues. And then the greys are a great opportunity. So there is, 20%, there's set opportunity to improve around career. 19% around, I feel like what I put in is equal to what I get out. So what can we do to boost that that feeling of equality between those two? And my good work is recognised. How can we boost appreciation and recognition within the team? There's things that could be quite simply responded to that don't require lots of time, lots of money. There could be very simple things that help boost and shift the grey into the blue. Okay, so this is the new piece, psychological safety. And so we're using Amy Edmondson's work around psychological safety, her definition. So a shared belief that a team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking and will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. So the diagram we're using here shows the sort of 4 layers of psychological safety, where people either feel excluded and there's no permission or respect for speaking up, so almost no safety. And then sort of between 1 and 3, we're going from I feel included to sort of maybe say something. 2 is I feel included and safe to raise ideas to improve with my direct team. 3 is I can contribute really easily and safely to improve things around here. And 4 is I can actually challenge the status quo quite hard. I can really go in and go, hey guys, how about we do this? And I can really challenge. And of course, challenger safety is where we get your huge innovation. Okay, so that's the basic model. And again, I've got a paper by Amy Edmondson that I can share with you that is the foundation, a bit like the Ron Wetstrom paper is the one for culture. So we ask 7 questions, I think, for around psychological safety. So Stacey mentioned this can be really hard to measure. Hopefully this measured in some way. And so we asked the team the question, on my team, if I make a mistake, it's not held against me. So again, in these questions, there are both positively framed and negatively framed questions to keep people thinking and on their toes. And it's on the agreement scale to disagreement scale. Just as you're having a look at those, any questions or thoughts, comments?
Well, it's pretty straightforward. I like it.
Yeah, and hopefully when you compare the spider graph to the psych safety graph, you'll see some of the capabilities the team have will be impacting how psychologically safe they feel about speaking up or about raising issues. So the intention is you can look at the different elements of the report and again build that picture and understand the connection between them as a way of them being able to give recommendations for what to focus on for this particular team. Okay. I'm just making sure there wasn't anything else I had to point out here. Yeah, so that just noticing the asterisks is that reflection about the fact that in the survey it's asked in the negative. So for example, people on this team do reject others for being different, would be how it's said in the survey, but we reverse it so we can represent all of the data together. Okay, in this case, a customer asked for some additional questions, so that is an opportunity. There is usually a charge for additional questions, but if a team had some specific things that it wanted to measure, maybe they had done an engagement survey before and there was some questions in that they wanted to continue to track, they could add those in. So we don't allow changes to our own questions, but we do allow some additions, particularly in that engagement space. So I'm just going to flick through those because they're not a standard thing. And then the customer feedback is here as well. So again, it's could either be external customers or internal customers, depending on the team's focus. And we ask the NPS score or the Net Promoter Score and just generally overall satisfied. Excuse me. And then we theme any qualitative responses. Okay. I know from a licensee perspective, from a Verizon perspective, sometimes what we've done is we've taken images from each section, capability, culture, engagement, psychological safety, and we've kind of created a one-page summary. So it would say, here is your big picture on one page. Here are your 4 images, and here are the key messages. In capability, your biggest strengths are, your biggest gaps are. The impact this is having on culture is, this is what's working really well, this is what's missing. The impact of that on your levels of engagement are in these areas, but you're having great results in here. And as a result of that, the psychological safety levels of the team are this. And so often, because there's so much information in the report, that high-level summary can be really useful, particularly to an executive member or the facility manager, whoever is the highest person you're talking to for that team. So they can kind of bring it all together. And it also helps, again, from a Verizon perspective, to go, well, if we were going to work with this team on shifting any of these elements, what would we recommend we focus on? So what capabilities would we get really clear about what we can increase? Are we going to focus on recognising people? Are we going to focus on raising concerns, so speaking up safely? What's the thing we're going to focus on around capability? That would have the biggest impact on culture, engagement, and psychological safety. Okay, that's the whole report we've just walked through.
I can see some great changes. I haven't looked at a CISCA for quite a while, so it's a nice little refresh for me, and it's got me all excited again. And I love just the visual presentation. I think that, you know, it just flows really nicely, and I agree, would love to see, you know, the snapshots all together on one page visually. It's a great talking piece, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it just helps, I guess, I think organisations, you know, this isn't going to be the only report they've received in the time that you're with them. So if anything that a licensee can do to help cut through to which is the core message, is really helpful. So they've got all of that data and that information, which is really gives confidence then to what are the core messages that pull out. And it could be, here are the 5 messages that we pull out that we recommend you focus on now. And then in 12 months' time or 6 months' time, when we feel like we've done that well, we can find the next set of 5 messages that we want to focus on, or we retest and find out how that went, and then what's the next step. And so, yeah, I think people find it really helpful to have that high-level puzzles, put all the pieces of the puzzle together.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Donna.
And mostly when places are particularly troubled, they just don't even have the time because they're trying to just work. And when the culture hasn't been right, they also don't have the time to read deep reports. So really, I think that high level of this is what it is. And once they start to see the fruit of it, they can go like, okay, now let's dig deeper.
Yes. Exactly. And that's the value add that the licensee offers to the organisation. So DDI gathers all the data, produces the report, and the intention is we give it to you, and so that you as a licensee have a chance to really read it and connect with it, and using your own knowledge of the organisation or the team, start to formulate what would your recommendations be. So what's that bigger picture? What are the key messages that you pull out? And what's the recommendations that you make? that you can then partner with them to sort of refine, check in, and then find a way to plan that implementation. So that piece is the value add that the licensee offers to the partnering organisation, in addition to the data that DDI is providing in the report. So I will send you guys the Ron Westrum paper, the Amy Edmondson paper. Nice background, good reading anyway, whether they're relevant to these reports or not, because I really do love them. They're really good. The Amy Edmondson paper is a little bit thicker and there's a lot of stats in it. So, but it is a good read. And I'll send a sample report as well. So you've got those to sort of reflect on. And then, as always, if you're going to kick off and do a CISCA for one of your clients, I don't expect you to remember all the elements and everything you've heard today. You'll have a copy of the recording you could look at, and just reach out, and we'll, as always, partner with you to get ready, to set it up, and then even in preparation for debriefing, you know, what are those key messages that we see, sort of partner with you to help you, if you want to do those recommendations, etc.
That's fabulous.
Okay. Anything else? I can't think of anything else. If I missed anything, any questions?
Not from me. That's just great. Very inspiring this morning, Donna.
Ooh, it's good to hear. So close to Christmas. the
Yeah,
Silkas are really good as well. The Silkas are, you know, again, the capability and the impact and the site safety. I love seeing those three together, and they create that so what message. You know, okay, that's my capability. So what? Well, the so what is this is the impact you're currently having. And there's a lot of really positive messages in the impact they're currently having, which is great to give someone in the care industry. And it also helps them focus on one or two things they can do to have an even greater impact. So yeah, I really love it. Sorry, Stacey, did I cut you off there?
No.
Good. Okay, well, it was lovely to see you both. Thank you.
Likewise, nice to meet you, Stacey.
Lovely to see you.
I hope you all, you both have a great Christmas if I don't see or speak to you beforehand. And hopefully we'll be doing some more Silkas and CISCAs together in the new year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hopefully, yeah. Merry Christmas to everyone.
Yes, you
Getting
too.
to that time of year, isn't it, where we have to start doing that? So yes, Merry Christmas.
We'll start hearing Mariah Carey on the radio all day now.
Lovely, awesome. Thank you. So nice to catch up. Take care, ladies.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you, Stacey.